Hi there, Rivets Forever here. Okay, so today I'm going to be putting together everything from episode 1 and 2. Now I ended up with about 6 hours worth of footage here, so condensing this down is going to be a massive act of self-control. But I think I'm up to the challenge. Okay then, let's have a go. I'm going to be experimenting with painting on the sprue, after some people suggested that. Not going to be using the Macaragi blue because I don't collect ultramarines. I collect dark angels, so Caliban green for me, even though my paint is about a decade old. So let's have a go. Naturally, I caught hours and hours and hours of me doing this, using fairly thin down paints because I was worried about them being clumpy. It looks pretty bad at the moment, but once the paints dry out and all of the moisture evaporates, it's not so bad. It might explain the thin coverage I got, but when I undercoated off of the sprue, I found much better results. Regardless of the order you do decide to build or paint the models in, don't be afraid to paint a thinner coat than perhaps might be required in the end. You can always come back and add another coat. But if you apply too thick a coat to begin with, you can't really capture the detail back without going through some annoying paint removal steps. I did grow quite bored of undercoating on the sprue, so I just decided to cut them out, and come what may. So once you've got all of your pieces cut out, it's time to sort them into their relevant piles. A lot of these models don't need to be fully glued together, but I am, because I believe X amount of people will. And I'm kind of wanting to approach this from the ground up, even though I've been doing this for probably, a couple of decades on and off. So as you can see, the undercoating on the sprue has left lots of areas with blue still visible, which is undesirable. Probably not worth the effort. I should say that the benefit of not gluing on the limbs is that it will make it easier to paint the detail of the bodies, whereas if someone's holding a gun across their chest, then good luck painting their chest. So if you're new to all of this or a perfectionist, you will probably already know this if you're a perfectionist, but if you don't, that's a word that I can pass on that's of some degree of moderate use. Okay, Space Marines assembled. It's time to have a close-up at the failings of the undercoating on the sprue technique for me. And time to bosh on some more paint. I am enjoying that in the magazine it looks like you're going to get like a granular, week-by-week explanation for different components of the rules for the game. I am pretty sure it would work out better value just to buy the rules. But at the moment, the magazine has definitely got me looking fairly favourably upon it. And I also want to say, before anyone else comments, or before anyone comments in fact, leave my brush alone. I know it's old and ugly, but, it gets the job done. You can see from above quite the opening between the two halves of the torso. Ideally, that wouldn't be as extreme as it is. I did find that you can avoid that by cutting the sort of prongs inside the body component a bit shorter. The magazine actually provides some Abaddon black, but I've got my own base coat black, so I'm going to be sticking with that because it's open. Thanks, though, Conquest magazine. This stage is effectively just base coating the areas that are going to have a metal finish in the end, so the joints in the armour or the weapons or equipment. Next up, they provide the Retributor Gold, I think that's the name of the paint, for any of the details, but I've said in a previous video, I think that Dark Angels don't really benefit from loads and loads of gold details. I like the contrast of the green and the white. Either way though, here I done goofed, because I should have put on a base coat of a darker colour, and then highlighted that to get sort of an effect with a bit more depth. Either way, if you follow their instructions, you should end up with something that looks a bit like this, but blue instead of green, and gold instead of white. The black should be the same. I've got to say, primary Space Marine models do look way more like I imagine Space Marines are always supposed to have looked. So, kudos there. Much bulkier, much mightier. After the lackluster results of painting on the sprue, I decided just to cut these off, the Plague Marines. These are some pretty reasonable models, but I have a bit of a gripe that I'll get to in the bit of the video where I actually talk about the magazine. And also one of mine came slightly warped from being sort of handled by newsagents or whatever else. Oh no, actually this one was delivered by the postman, and one of the models was ever so slightly broken. I've noticed that episode 3's models come in a box rather than like a sort of plastic blister pack. I'm wondering if that's part of the reason why. And then onto the task of sorting out the bits of the models, which is a lot easier in this case than it is with the primary Space Marine models. These are much more distinct. It should also be said that they are really, really easy to put together, as their nomenclature implies. They're called easy to build. The most difficult task is aligning the arms, which you can see I've just blitzed there like I was born to it. This is the model I had to fix slightly. You can see the gap on his backpack. That was where the part was sort of on the verge of falling off. Once you've assembled them, it's time to stick them on their bases. I always like to make sure that my models are standing slightly further back. I don't know if you've got a preference. I think they look weird when they're standing too far forward. Next up, some off the sprue undercoating, which I found worked a lot better. Despite my preference for using ridiculously thin coats of paint. Just a much quicker, much more thorough experience. I only decided to paint on the sprue because I was being a bit timid, and I regret it. Then we are going on to, just like with the primary Space Marines, painting sort of chainmail and obviously metal components black, providing a base coat for later colours I would expect. At this stage, being careful is nice, but absolutely not required. It's better to get in all of the detail of the things that you're providing the second layer of base coat to, and then tidy up with more of the main model's base coat afterwards. At least that's what I find. Here's me doing a bit of necessary cleanup right now. So yeah, don't panic. Then lastly, it's the fine detail, which they want painted in the same gold that they wanted the Ultramarines painted in that I didn't use before. So welcome to... Hold on. Where are you? What's your name? This is professional... Retributor armor. Let me try saying that again. Retributor. No, I still feel like that's wrong. Retributor. Retributor. Retributor? Now it doesn't make any sense at all to me. Retributor armor. We'll say just Retributor armor, and that'll do. I've made this point before. I'm about to make it again. These new Plague Marines are huge! Look at the size of that compared to a normal Chaos Space Marine. And it's about the same size as a Primaris, which I was under the impression were an entirely new thing. So it looks like Chaos have already worked out how to knock together some Primaris Space Marines. Like 10,000 years ago. Also, this is an older Plague Marine model. And as you can see, total height difference. So sorry if you've heard me whining about that before, but it's a valid point. Anyway, if you follow all of the tips and suggestions that they provide, you should end up with something that looks a bit like this. Which, you know, close up, already looks sort of borderline presentable. Looking forward to seeing where they take it. And because of the magazine, I've also been experimenting with painting. And these are my 5 new little fellas that I've knocked together in between waiting for coats of paint to dry on these ones. So yeah, I don't know if this bit should have been shorter, or if it should have been longer. I cut out a lot of things that I wanted to say or show in the service of trying to make it short, and it's still basically 10 minutes. So feedback there will be really appreciated. Let me know what I'm doing wrong, and I will grow. This was originally going to be sort of 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning of the video where I talk about what happens with episode 3 and 4. Obviously this turned out being like 10 minutes long, so I made it its own thing. I think that was a good decision, but maybe you disagree. Let me know. And of course, if you want to help, there's a PayPal and a Patreon, Steam groups, and a Discord, all on the front page. Thanks for watching.